Welcome to Unity of Charlotte. I'm Marty Bacher. It's my privilege to welcome you here this beautiful morning. Unity of Charlotte is here to nurture a deep, mature experience of the divine through the practice of unity principles. Simply put, we are here to love, to grow, and to serve. And we believe that spiritual community enhances our experience of life. It makes it richer, deeper, and more expanded. So if you're joining us for the first time today, we just want to say welcome. We're delighted that you're here. We invite you to relax and enjoy yourself. If you didn't receive a packet as you came in, we want to give you one of those and invite you to discover more of what we offer. Invite you to sign up for our email newsletter and like us on Facebook and do all those cool things. The people you see running about with blue ribbons are here to just know that those people will help you find your way about. We also want to make you aware that we do have a ministry of prayer that is available to serve you. Two ways you can approach that. There's a ministry of prayer box with forms in the lobby, and there's also, you can go online to our website, unityofcharlotte.org, and complete a request there. Either way, we're happy and delighted to be of service to you. Letting go of the busyness and the fullness and all that it took to get here, to breathe into this moment. Simply taking a few deep cleansing breaths, allowing ourselves to relax, to allow the mind to become still. And we are reminded that there is but one life, one presence, one power, one infinite being. And it is in this presence that we live and move and have our being. So today is a day of remembering the truth of who we are. Remembering that we are divine beings unfolding on this sacred journey of life. How grateful to have this opportunity to come together, to remember this truth, to share this journey with our fellow travelers. And I am constantly reminded of those who give so generously of their time and their talent and their treasure to allow this community to unfold, to allow this church to grow and prosper. So we give thanks for all of those who help provide this service, participate in any way, and all of the other parts of the puzzle. I'm grateful for this knowing, for this teaching, for this realization and revelation of truth in each of our lives. And I know we are blessed beyond measure. I know that this day unfolds perfectly, joyously, wonderfully, and that which needs to be heard is heard. That which needs to be said is said. And it is good, and it is very good. And so in joy and gratitude, I simply release this word, knowing that it is so. As together we say, and so it is. Amen.
I'm reaching out to know the divine.
And so join me in today's affirmation. Today, I awaken to my divine potential. Spirit within me guides my sacred journey. I honor my past, I celebrate my future, and I live in the present. My life is continually expanding in ways of joyful self-expression. Today, I awaken to my divine potential. Thank you. So today, I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone. Get up here, Peggy. You didn't think I was going to let you sneak out, did you? So one of the joys of ministry is you're always meeting new people and getting to know new people and letting them become part of your life. And one of the heartbreakers of ministry is you have people that think their grandchildren are more important than living in Charlotte. So crazy, it's crazy. But Peggy has been such an active and vital part of this community for many, many years. She is the rarest of breeds in New Thought world. She's not only a longtime Unity member, but she's a third-generation Unity person. And so she came and became a part of this community and has served on the board 50 times and helped with us find this building. And just, you know, we'll be here all day if I do share all of the things that she's done for us. But needless to say, she has not only served us through her effort, but has always been a spiritual presence keeping this community moving forward. And so we just wanted to take a moment today to acknowledge you and to thank you and to bless you on your journey. There is a card floating around somewhere that has the kind thoughts. And I know when I was moving here, people tried to give me stuff, and I was like, I don't want no more stuff, you know, I'm packing. But we will buy you lunch when you get wherever, or buy you dinner. So there's a little something because we love you. Like if you'd like to share, we'd love for you to do that. Yeah.
Well, this church home means a lot. It's bittersweet. I'm excited about the move. It's where I'm supposed to go. Spirit has guided this in the most perfect way. All the pieces have just fallen into place. It was a process that started about 2.5 years ago. And when I moved to Charlotte from the mountains, we didn't have a Unity Church there. So the two things that I was looking for when my daughter was 10 was good schooling for her and a town that had a Unity Church. And I arrived in this town this time of the year when everything was blooming. And I said, what is this? Does Charlotte have a law that says you have to have 2 dogwoods and 5 azaleas in your front yard and they have to bloom simultaneously? I guess so. So it's a beautiful city. This is a wonderful center. You're going to continue to attract wonderful members into this family. And thank you for allowing me to be part of it for the last 23 years. Love you all. And there's a Unity Church in Charlottesville, so if you want to come up and experience the mountains or the historical sites or something like that, let me know. You're always welcome.
Thank you, dear. Somewhere we'll find your card. Yes. Yes. So we're moving into a new theme for the month, and it's the power of myth. And so I wanted to read from a selection from Karen Armstrong. She wrote a wonderful little book called A Short Story of Myth. And I kind of think it sort of sets us up for what we want to begin discussing this month. She writes in her intro, what is a myth? Human beings have always been myth makers. Archaeologists have unearthed Neanderthal graves containing weapons, tools, and the bones of a sacrificial animal, all of which suggests some kind of belief in a future world that was similar to their own. From a very early date, therefore, it appears that human beings were distinguished by their ability to have ideas that went beyond their everyday experience. We are meaning-seeking creatures. Human beings fall easily into despair, and from the very beginning we invented stories that enable us to place our lives in a larger setting, that revealed an underlying pattern, and gave us a sense that against all the depressing and chaotic evidence to the contrary, life had meaning and value. Another particular characteristic of the human mind is its ability to have ideas and experiences that we cannot explain rationally. We have imagination, a faculty that enables us to think of something that is not immediately present, and that which, when we conceive it, has non-objective evidences. We know that Charles Fillmore talks about one of the 12 powers being the power of imagination. The imagination is the faculty that produces religion and mythology. Today, mythical thinking has fallen into disrepute. We often dismiss it as irrational and self-indulgent. But the imagination is a lot of the faculty that enables scientists to bring new knowledge to light and to invent technology that has made us immeasurably more effective. Mythology and science both extend the scope of human beings. Like science and technology, mythology is not about opting out of this world, but about enabling us to live more intensely within it. Thank you. So we have two special music selections today. First one, this young lady is just becoming such a little rock star up here. Every time she sings for us, we're grateful and joyful, and so we appreciate her willingness to share of her gifts and talents. Please welcome Susan Caney.
I hope y'all don't get too tired of this song. If you do, though, just let me know or tell Patricia. Okay. Where I am, God is. Where I stand, God is standing strong. Where I breathe, God is breathing life as me. Where I sing, God is. Where I dance, joy lifts my feet. Where I live, beauty's flowing free, in and out and through me, as me. Where I doubt, God is the faith in me.
Miss Susan Caney. I don't know about you. I don't think I'll ever grow tired of that song. In fact, I was thinking I need to hear that more often, like every morning before I start my day might be a good place to start. So as I mentioned, we're in a new season. I always love springtime. As life is revealing itself everywhere, as Peggy said, yes, everything is in full bloom. My allergies are reminding me of this. So if you see me drinking lots of waters, it's to counteract the antihistamines. But it's beautiful, and it reminds us that life is always in a process of unfolding. It's easier to see it in the springtime. But life is always perfect. And so I wanted this month to really delve a little bit into this idea of the hero's journey, of the sacred journey that we're all on, and of this idea that mythology is our, too often people speak of, oh, that's a myth, like that's an untruth, right? And so, as Karen Armstrong says, it's fallen in disrepute. But I think when we really understand the power of mythology, as Joseph Campbell and so many others have put forth, we can embrace our stories differently. So those of you who are part of the Unity community realize that we're not what you would call traditional Christians. If that's breaking news to you, I'm glad I could be the one to tell you. You would have figured it out eventually. And when I say that, sort of as I grew up in what I call a traditional church, was very much about Jesus as my Savior. Jesus is my entree into heaven. Jesus as a lot of things. And then as I evolved as a person, I needed something. It doesn't make it wrong, what I grew up with. In fact, I'm grateful for my upbringing. I'm grateful that I learned the Bible at an early age. I'm grateful for all of my journey. It just felt to me always like there's a larger story. There's a bigger story. And this thing that we do sometimes when I don't know if you've noticed this. You may have noticed this. You're observant. There's a lot of division going on in our world right now. Right? Of political division and religious division and all this sort of thing, because it's as if we take our story and we say mine is the right story and the only story, and therefore I need to somehow convince you or destroy you or whatever we got to do, right? To me, I've always had this mind that loved the diversity of humanity. So I was looking for something more in my life, and I had told myself once I left church as a young person that it wasn't going to be found in a church. Didn't believe in that. So, of course, life is what it is, and when we say never, you can just put it on your calendar. It's going to happen, right? And so in my search, I found myself drawn to a community that took what I learned as a child and enhanced it, helped me see a larger story. And I began to appreciate not these principles for living, the idea that we are co-creative beings with the divine, that we can work with universal principles. You see, Jesus gave us these clues. He actually laid it out there, and then they wrote a bunch of other words around what he said, so you kind of have to go back to what he was saying. But he would say things like, greater works than these you can also do, which would imply that if we were to embrace the consciousness that he held, then we could do great works, that we could be healers, that we could prosper, that we could help others through these spiritual principles. We began to understand the idea that he said, when it is done unto you as you believe, that is a universal truth. That what we believe becomes our experience. And so when we believe that life is supposed to be hard, we unconsciously create circumstances and situations to make it hard. It's amazing. But the good news is, what if we were to believe that life could be joyous. Life could be easy. Life could unfold perfectly, that we are abundant beings now and we are simply open and receptive to our greater good. What if we started believing that? What might happen? So my journey was moving out of victimhood, that life was happening to me, to begin to understand that life, actually I could create and co-create. And actually, as I evolved and grew, I realized life was working through me and as me. Susan so beautifully saying, wherever I am, whatever I do, God dances through me, God sings through me, God speaks through me. And it's not an egotistical thing to say that. It's actually a very humble place to speak from. But then as I began to practice these principles, my life did change. And my life evolved, and things at an outer level changed because things at an inner level had changed. But I also recognized that, I remember, I probably have shared this before, I remember being in school learning from one of my teachers, and she shared a lesson that she had learned in her homiletics class. Homiletics, by the way, is when you learn how to sermonize, learn how to speak, so to speak. And she said, her teacher said to her, honey, that was a really lovely talk. And what did you say to the person who cried themselves to sleep last night? You see, and I've always remembered that, because sometimes in our metaphysical wonder, we can judge others, like that famous line of, how did you create that? Which I'm just going to tell you is not a helpful line when people are in pain. I'm just going to, I've learned a few things. That's one of them, right? People don't need to hear if you're embracing these. So we get this idea sometimes, this mistaken idea, that if we just got the consciousness right, then everything else would just flow, and there would be money and loving relationships and all of that. And that if we're not experiencing that, then something may be wrong with my consciousness. So we traded in old-fashioned guilt for new improved metaphysical guilt. Yay! Look how I've evolved and changed as time has gone by. So I remember when I began to study this idea of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell puts forth. And I always like to get this clarified. Hero is a generic term like doctor. But if you want to put Shiro in there, I'm cool, whatever. But I'm talking about a universal journey that we're all on, going through this. So if you could give me the next slide, please. So here is a shortened version, because if you've ever read Joseph Campbell, he's deep and heady. And so this is Hero's Journey for Dummies, me. And so if I understand it, then, right? And he talks about this idea that what you see throughout mythology, what you see throughout literature, is this ongoing commonality. And our hero is living in the ordinary world. I call it the fat, dumb, happy world. We're just going about our life. And we're doing our thing. And then one of two things, there's two ways the journey begins. One, that inner longing, that divine discontent, that I know there's something more for me. The other way is crisis is thrust upon us. And we are now forced to find a new way. And so think about, there's a few, I often use Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz because it's a universal mythological story that we all know. So Dorothy is just living in this black and white world in Kansas, longing for a better world, and then through a tornado is thrust into a new world, which actually had Technicolor. And so in this, she's called to the adventure, finding herself in a land that she had not lived in before, trying to figure this out. Now, Joseph Campbell says it's often on this beginning part of the journey that we are given a gift. And so Dorothy, unfortunately, parks her house on a witch. Oops. Which sets up the journey further, right? But she's given something. Silver slippers. No, I'm telling you, read the book. It wasn't, but when you had Technicolor, why would you do silver slivers when you could do ruby? I like to throw in these little bits of information. So we all know the ruby slippers, just like we know the apple in the Garden of Eden, which was never there either. But nevertheless, it doesn't matter, because we're talking mythologically now, not logically. And so she's given a gift, but she doesn't understand the gift. Now, then the journey begins. And there comes a point in each of our journey where we cross the threshold. In other words, sometimes there's the option to go back. If you're experiencing this at a spiritual level, you're being called to something different. You're starting this journey, and then very often you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is uncomfortable. Oh, this is not good. And so the temptation is to try and get back to the ordinary world. But there comes a point where we cross that threshold, and there's no going back. So now we've got to figure out what to do. Now we've got to figure out, what do I do? Now, this is what makes great literature. So Dorothy, which I've done a whole series on this, but think about this, is starting down this yellow brick road to find salvation. Right? And she attracts interesting characters to go on the journey with her, each bringing a quality of spirit with them that they don't recognize they have. And they begin to find themselves, and they find themselves eventually, after being chased by those screaming mean monkeys and all kinds of other hazardous things, which is what makes great literature, by the way. But it's also the point when people show up in my office and say, can we just pray this away? I know I wanted to be on a spiritual journey, but I didn't want a road of trials. I didn't want to be challenged. And I said, well, I think we want to pray for the courage and wisdom to move through this experience. And so when we move on the road of trials, eventually they find themselves there, and lo and behold, they've put themselves in front of Oz/God and discover, great line, they discover that this is a man. And she says to him, you, after the gig is up, you are a very bad man. And he says, classic line, no, I'm a very bad wizard. I'm actually a very good man. And so the ultimate story of that, you have to go through the supreme ordeal. Now, the supreme ordeal is not necessarily how dramatic it is. It's the moment people in the recovery community talk about hitting bottom. And there's no predefined spot. Some people got to go way low before they figure it out. Others figure it out more early. But it's that moment when you look at yourself and you say, aha, I must provide the thing that I'm looking for. And so in this moment of realization, she is given this simple gift that you are enough. And you have within you all that is necessary to go home. And so she clicks her heels together. Remember, the supernatural aids that are given to us. This is why I always tell people, this is why we want to do our spiritual practice. We want to have the tools available so that when life gets tough, when things get uncomfortable, we have the tools to help us move through that ordeal, whatever it is, because what you notice on the other side is you find the gift, you find the reward, you find the blessing. And so many of us in this room can look back to a point in our life which seemed like the most painful and hurtful and disruptive thing we would ever go through. And we can look at it now and say, because of that experience, I am who I am. We've been sharing a little bit about my journey, but I would say, in my ministry, by getting fired from my first ministry, by being called terrible things, by having a whole bunch of stuff happen, it turned out to be the greatest gift because I decided I wasn't going to keep doing the people-pleasing, codependent stuff that I was doing. And that I would have to figure out who I am, what I stood for, and what I brought to the world. And then those who liked that, those who could learn from that, were welcome. And those who didn't, I would lovingly support them in finding the church or a minister that worked for them. Sounds cold, doesn't it? But the power is knowing who you are. The power is going through whatever you're being faced with to discover your strength, your clarity, your wisdom. And then you return on the journey home. And when we return on the journey home, then we come back into the ordinary reality. Now, some people would say it's almost as if at this one level there's this, above this dotted line is the known, and below it is the unknown. Above it is the logic, below it is the mystery. You see, mystery and mythology have the same roots. And there's a part of us that understands that. So when we return home, we're not the same person we were before. We're now the master of two worlds. And so in our little example of Dorothy, she returns home, but she is alive to what was boring and black and white before. She had a love and appreciation and a value for these amazing people that were in her life. Who knew? But if you see this story, go watch Star Wars. Once you see it everywhere. And by the way, I've made little flyers for you. They're available so you can have your very own. They're out there in the lobby. So just of this journey. Because what's helpful is when we get this, you see, this is what I believe we are as spiritual beings. Our journey is we are in this material world, but we are spiritual beings. And the trick sometimes is we forget and we think we are physical beings, or we think that the physical circumstances around us have the power, and we get busy trying to change the outer, to rearrange, recommit, or we face a challenge, we think, obviously the answer is to get the thing that I think is missing. And so I go in pursuit of that perfect relationship. I go in pursuit of the thing. I go in pursuit of all these things instead of stopping and realizing, maybe this isn't so much about changing God's mind, if you've ever prayed that way. And I know you haven't because you're much more enlightened, but I have. Maybe it's about me changing my mind about the nature of the divine. Jesus said to us that this divine presence, this power, this Father, he called it, delights in its self-expression through us. Wants to be expressed. But we have to be aware of that holy relationship. And so sometimes by going through this journey, it may be an ended relationship. It might be a physical ailment. It may be a financial loss. It may be something that feels painful and hurtful. And yet, if we realize who we are, say it all the time, when we realize we are spiritual beings that are having this human experience, that indeed we are here for the human experience, then we take it in stride. And we gain the clarity and the wisdom, and we do our work so that when the ordeals come, when the road of trials come, we move through them and we accept the blessing that event happens for us. Isn't that amazing? So for me, understanding this, there's a time when we want to really look at how do I co-create with the divine? How do I use the spiritual principles? But there's also a time to look at what's happening in our life and bless it? What is this here to teach me? What needs to be revealed? You see, I go back to some of these classic, like in Star Wars, if you remember the early one, the first one, which in my mind's still the best one, but Luke goes through the same exact journey. He wanted to go out into play in the world, but he had responsibilities at home, and then they blew up his home and his parents, so, he was freed to go do his journey. And he was given training, he was given tools, and he was given all this stuff, and he had a mentor. You may remember that little green guy, Yoda. And Yoda taught him many things, and they did all of this stuff. But there came a point when Luke had to have this encounter. And Yoda says to him, you can't take anything with you. Actually, Yoda said, with you, nothing you may take, because it's Yoda. But, right? And so he has built his tools, he built his consciousness, he built his, but ultimately he came face to face with his darkness. As we move through this month, I'll refer back to this journey, so I wanted to spend a little bit time on it because you see it over and over. And when we start reading mythological teachings, including the Christian mythology, I'm going to call it that, don't mean it demeaning, you see these things. Now, here's what I know about mythology. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Because we have sort of diminished that in our Western world, in our logical way of thinking, we sort of diminish the mystery, the intuitive side, the more feminine aspects of who we are. And what we should know, and here's what I would have you know today, things don't have to be factually accurate to contain truth. You see, our Western logical mind, logos, that mind, wants to be able to measure, to point, to have five senses, to do all of these things. But the mysterious mind, the spiritual mind, knows the larger story. And so something, when we look at, I often talk about learning about Jonah and the whale in Bible study. At the same time, I was learning about how to dissect a frog in science class, and I was getting two very disconnected stories about digestion. Right? Because what I was learning in school, Jonah didn't make any sense of just popping back, hey, I was just hanging out in the digestive system for a few days, right? Didn't make any sense. Many of the stories that we've been given don't make logical sense. But they don't need to if we can move into that mythical mind, into that mystery. When we can embrace that, then we understand that it's speaking to us at a larger story. We'll look at this as we look at death and resurrection, the common story throughout the ages. We'll look at that. So for me, there's sort of this shift when rather than saying, well, my logical mind sees a challenge, a problem, and opportunity, whatever metaphysical thing you want to call it, and say, well, how do I solve this problem? Whereas the mystical mind says, what is the mystery that needs to be embraced? See, there's a mystery unfolding through all of us. We're each on our own individualized sacred journey. And while you can have people that will give you tools and give you inspiration and give you hope, ultimately, we're each on our own to find our own truth and to live more fully. That feels complete. If I start, then we're going to be here another hour. So, right? So is this helpful? Yeah. So when we, so sometimes we want to just solve a problem, and sometimes we want to say, ooh, something's trying to happen. Something's trying to reveal itself. And maybe I'd rather not have this situation, but since it's here, perhaps it's bringing me a gift. And again, I'm just going to remind you, the gift is on the other side. See how that circle goes? It's like, well, I'll just skip over that. Okay. Call me when you're ready to do the work. No, right? So I think it's magical when we can understand that, so then all of the stories, doesn't matter whether they're the tradition, you see the same pattern. They're helping us understand who we are. They're giving us truth. And let me tell you one more thing. Whether we like to admit it or not, we believe more in mythology than we do in facts. And if you don't believe me, go try and have a fact-based conversation with somebody that believes something very different from you. Just saying. We believe what we believe. No, and we don't need to take it away from anyone, but we should be aware of it. Right? So for me, I always bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, and teachers of all faiths because we're all on one journey. We're just figuring out in different ways. So as we move into this, wherever you are on that journey, and so there can be many journeys within the big journey, by the way. There's little circles that happen within the larger circle. Just recognize this pattern that's seeking to unfold. And realize the truth of who you are. That you are a divine being connected with the One, and therefore all of those qualities of spirit, joy and love and compassion and happiness, and all of those are already yours. I'm already there. I'm already home. Right? So let us pray together, shall we? And know that I bless you on this journey. And as I remind you, with you, nothing you may take, except that which is known at the spiritual realm. That recognition and realization of the one life, the one power, the one infinite being that is the very source and substance of all that is expressing in and through and as all of creation, the same divine wisdom and intelligence that created this physical universe in which we live, is our very life and being. And while we might believe in separation, there can be no separation. And so we return to that awareness, that home, that place which recognizes and knows the spiritual reality. We give thanks for our divine inheritance, that we have been given freely all of these blessings, all of these qualities of spirit, the 12 powers as we sometimes refer to them, called forth to reveal those into this world. We bring forth greater love, greater wholeness, greater peace, greater abundance. For we are the divine instrument through which life is realized. So let us give thanks for the many blessings of our life. Let us give thanks for the entire journey. Let us give thanks for this inner realization and its outer demonstration. For in this moment we recognize we are indeed blessed beyond measure. And as we accept that blessing for ourselves, we extend it. We extend it to this spiritual community, divinely unfolding, serving as a light of truth, a light of love in the world. We bless our brothers and sisters around the planet, holding a vision for a planet that works for all, for a planet at peace, for goodwill for all. And as is my custom, we bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of all faiths, and we honor the many pathways to the divine. For all of these blessings, and so many more, I simply give thanks, allowing it to be so, as together we say, and so it is. As more and more of our choir members are coming out of the closet and going, yeah, I can sing. So the Supremes was already taken, so I've named them the Starlets. Susan, Randy, and Patricia with this amazing song. Please welcome.
by thy grace that I feel. It's by thy grace that I feel. It's by thy grace that I feel your holy name. Some
The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.